So we'll go right into the class. Sita Ram, Lakshman, Hanumanji ki jai. This is one verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, from the second canto, chapter 7. Chapters entitled Schedule Incarnations with Specific Functions. This is verse number 23. Do we have it up on the board? Yeah. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Asman prasada sukha kalaya klesha. Asma prasada sukha kalaya kalesa. Is flakuvamsa avitirna guru nidese. Tishtam banasa datyanuja vivivesa. Yasmin virudhya dasakar kandara atim archat. Asmam prasada sukha kalaya kalesa. Is flakuvamsa avitirna guru nidese. Ladies. Asman prasada sukha kalesa. Asmat, unto us, beginning from Brahma, down to the insignificant ant, prasada, causeless mercy, sumukha, so inclined, kalaya, with his plenary extensions, kalesaha, the Lord of all potencies, is Flaku, Maharaj is Flaku, in the dynasty of the sun, Vamse, family, Avatirya, by descending in Guru of the Father or the spiritual master. Nide say, under the order of Tishtan, being situated in Vanam, in the forest, Sadaita Anuja, along with his wife and younger brother. Avishesa entered Yasmin, unto whom Virudhya, being rebellious, Dasakandara, Ravana, who had 10 heads, Artim, great distress, Archat, achieved. Translation: due to his causeless mercy upon the living entities within the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with his plenary extensions, appeared in the family of Maharaj Isflaku as the Lord of his internal potency, Sita. Under the order of his father, Maharaj Dasarat, he entered the forest and lived there for considerable years with his wife and younger brother. Ravana, who was very materially powerful with 10 heads on his shoulders, committed a great offense against him and was thus ultimately vanquished. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Lord Rama is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his brothers named Bharat, Lakshman, and Sutrugna are his plenary expansions. All 4 brothers are Vishnu Tattva and were never ordinary human beings. There are many unscrupulous and ignorant commentators on the Ramayana who present the younger brothers of Lord Ram as ordinary living entities. But here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most authentic scripture on the science of God, it is clearly stated that his brothers were his plenary expansions. Originally, Lord Ramachandra is the incarnation of Vasudeva. Lakshmana is the incarnation of Sankarsana. Vard is the incarnation of Pradyumna, and Satrugna is the incarnation of Aniruddha, expansions of the personality of Godhead. Lakshmiji, Sita, is the internal potency of the Lord and is neither an ordinary woman nor the external potency incarnation of Durga. Durga is the external potency of the Lord, and she is associated with Lord Shiva. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.7, the Lord appears when there are discrepancies in the discharge of factual religion. Lord Ramachandra also appeared under the same circumstances, accompanied by his brothers and his internal potency, Lakshmiji Sita Devi. Lord Ramachandra was ordered by his father Maharaj Dasarat to leave home for the forest under awkward circumstances, and the Lord, as the ideal son of his father, carried out the order even on the occasion of his being declared the king of Ayodhya. One of his younger brothers, Lakshmanaji, desired to go with him, and so also his eternal wife, Sita Devi, desired to go with him. The Lord agreed to both of them, and altogether they entered the Dandakaranya forest to live there for 14 years. During this stay in the forest, there was some quarrel between Ramachandra and Ravana, and the latter kidnapped the Lord's wife, Sita. The quarrel ended in vanquishing of the great powerful Ravana, along with his kingdom and family. Sita is Lakshmiji, the goddess of fortune, but she is never to be enjoyed by any living being. She is meant to be worshipped by the living being alone with her husband, Sri Ramachandra. A materialistic man like Ravana does not understand this great truth, but on the contrary, he wants to snatch Sita Deva from the custody of Ram, and thus incurs great miseries. The materialists, who are after opulence and material prosperity, may take lessons from the Ramayana that the policy of exploiting the nature of the Lord without acknowledging the supremacy of the Supreme Lord is the policy of Ravana. Ravana was very much advanced materially, so much so that he turned his kingdom, Lanka, into pure gold or full material wealth. But because he did not recognize the supremacy of Lord Ramachandra, he defied him by stealing his wife Sita. Ravana was killed and all his opulence and power were destroyed. Lord Ramachandra is a full incarnation of the six opulences in full, and he is therefore mentioned in this verse as Kalasa, or the master of all opulence. Umagyan timirandasya gena jana salakaya chaksun militam yena tasmai Sri Gurave namaha namahom Vishnupadaya Krishna prasthaya bhutale Srimakti Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pastyatya De Satarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhischa Kripa Sindhu Pevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ramadi Murti Shukalani Amena Tishtana Navatara Akaro Bhuvaneshu Kinchu Krishna Swayam Samabhava Paramam Pamanyo Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. So that verse is from the Brahma Samhita, which mentions that the source of all incarnation is actually the Supreme Lord known as Sri Krishna. He is Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidanandan Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karnam. But from him manifests various forms of the Supreme Lord, and the most prominent and most, what we say, worshipful of all of them is Sri Ramchandra. In fact, it says there is no difference between Lord Ram and Lord Krishna, except that their activities in fulfilling actually his desire to reduce the burden of the world are slightly different. But ultimately their mission is the same, and practically their activities are all completely and fully transcendental. Although we can understand transcendence when we hear the activities of Krishna. But Ram, he appeared in one particular mood, and that is to act like an ordinary human being by giving up his position as the Prince Regent, which was about to, we all know the story, how he was about to be coronated as the king of Ayodhya. But following the instructions of his father, who were both of them, his father was very resistant to give him the instructions, but being a Kshatriya king and having promised his word, for a Kshatriya to go back on their word is considered worse than death. So they keep their word even if it's against all good fortune for them. And Ram immediately accepted that. Now the kingdom of Ayodhya, it's described in detail. What was it like at that time? The kingdom was flourishing in all levels of opulence. The kingdom was 24 miles one direction and 96 miles in another direction. There were millions and millions of inhabitants. Everyone was working according to their particular varna, and all the varnas were cooperating with each other. The city was full of beauty. The streets were lined with opulence, marble, gold, and various types of precious metals were decorating the streets. Everything was, you might say, ideal from the material point of view. There was the soldiers under the direction of King Dasarat were powerful, and no one could penetrate that city, even if they had the greatest armies. So everything was perfect. And King Dasarat was such a powerful warrior. He could fight with not just one, but thousands of charioteers at once and remain victorious. You might say, in all sense, the opulence of Ayodhya and the happiness of the citizens were at the limit of perfection. But still, after all of this, there was one anomaly, or apparent anomaly. You might say one unhappiness that was running through the mind of Dasarat. Although everything was there, he was unrivaled. All the citizens obeyed the king perfectly, and everyone was living. There was no harsh speech. There was no atheism. There was no other activities but their duties to each other and the duties to the king, and of course worshipping of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But one problem. For a parent, Dasarat had no heir to the throne. And this was his sadness. So you can imagine, this is a nice, not nice, but this is a very instructive point, that one can have so much external success, power, money, fame, position, followers, and so many achievements. But if his heart is not happy, it's all useless. So his heart was not happy because he had no heir to the throne. And therefore, he was thinking, I have to do something. And as hard as he had tried previously, he could not create a son. And so he was morose. He turned to his chief minister, Sumanta, and explained his sadness. Sumanta knew something and explained it to him. And he said, also, I want to perform a horse sacrifice, because it was understood by performing this sacrifice successful, one's desires would be fulfilled. And Sumanta agreed, but he said also, you should know that you had a daughter, and that daughter, now living in the kingdom of Anga, under the care of one of your close friends, Romapad Maharaj, and she has married a particular person whose name was Rishishringa. And Rishishringa is a powerful Brahmana. You should go to the kingdom of Maharaj Romapad and ask for the use of Rishishringa and bring him here. He can perform a sacrifice, and by that sacrifice, if it is done according to the principles of ideal, according to Shastras, then you will receive a son. So this gave some enthusiasm, some happiness, some joy, some hope to Maharaj Dasarat, and he left. And after approaching Romapad Maharaj and explaining his situation and asking, because actually he wasn't even, Maharaj Romapad wasn't aware that actually Shanta was, of course, he was the daughter of Dasarat, but he had been given to Romapad. And Romapad raised her as his only daughter. So he was surprised, but at the same time happy to comply with the request of Dasarat. So he sent both of them to the kingdom of Ayodhya, and they performed a sacrifice. It's nicely described how that sacrifice was carried out, and by the power of Rishishringa. Rishishringa was a pure Brahmana. He never came in contact with any female other than his wife, and he married in a very, what we say, ideal situation. He lived in the forest, grew up for many years. He was very austere. He had all good qualities. He had all good Brahminical training. And so when he came to the kingdom of Ayodhya, he performed a sacrifice, and by the benefit of that sacrifice, out of the fire of the yajna, a very dark personality rose with a beautiful pot in his hand, and in that pot was some called payasan. Payasan, I don't know how to describe it, but it's considered to be something like sweet rice. I think that's the closest thing we can understand. It's a milk and sugary preparation that comes by way of these different types of sacrifices according to the particular way the sacrifice is orchestrated. And so this personality came, he was a mystical personality, and he handed this pot of payasan to Dasaratha. And the instructions were given to Dasaratha, you distribute it to your 3 wives. Now Dasaratha had 350 wives. We only hear of 3. How did he have 350 wives? Interesting. Well, that's mentioned also in the Ramayana. There was a personality who was roving around at that time. His name was Bhrigupati, or Parasamram. And he was always looking for those kings that weren't qualified to lead. And then he would challenge them and kill them. But one thing he wouldn't do is that if anyone was getting married, he wouldn't interfere with that king. So every time the word came that Parasaram was coming close to Ayodhya, Dasaratha got another wife. The wife is the better half. So he had 353 better halves. Hare Krishna. So that was his protection against Parasaram, because Parasaram was a gentleman. And so he honored that. And so each time he left, he came, but he did come back. So this was mentioned. But there were 3 principal queens, Kausalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi. And these were the main queens these are the ones that he associated with. And he divided this payasam. First he gave half to Kausalya, and he gave the other half to Sumitra. And then he took 1/2 of what he gave to Sumitra and divided that in half and gave a quarter of that portion to Kaikeyi. And later, after ingesting or eating this benefit from the yajna, they all became carrying great personalities in their womb. And in due course of time, 4 illustrious personalities appeared. And as is mentioned, they were actually the Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna, Ram, Lakshman, Satrugna, and Bharat. And Kausalya, she was the principal and oldest of the queens. She had Ram. Sarmishtra had Lakshman and Satrugna, and Kaikeyi had Bharat. So these 4 young, great personalities grew up. And at one point, we know the whole intrigue, when Ram was going to be coronated as King Prince Regent of the entire country at the time. Kaikeyi somehow or other changed the whole thing around. It's interesting how this is a very instructive pastime. I'll read something here. It's called The Power of Bad Association. it was known fact that in Ayodhya that Kaikeyi loved Lord Ram more than their own son Bharat. Then how could she become so evil? It was the bad association of a personality who was her maidservant named Mantara. And of course, by the influence of Mantara, who used her power and her position to influence Kaikeyi to give up her love for Ram and to speak in such a way as to accept the fact that her son should become the king. As is mentioned here, she had even more love for Ram than she did for her own son, but by the bad association. So, sadhu sangha, sarva sastri hoy, lavamata sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. When Lord Chaitanya was speaking to Sanatana Goswami, he asked him, Sanatana Goswami asked Lord Chaitanya, what is the first duty of a Vaishnava? First. And Lord Chaitanya said, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnava Achar. That one must accept the association of the devotees, and Asat Sangha Tyaga, one should give up the association of those who are materialistic minded. So here we see how association can influence a good person to be something else. And it's not something that happens rarely, it happens a lot. We saw how Ajamil, Brahmin, grown up in a Brahminical family, worshiping the Lord all the way through his birth, simply by associating in his mind, not even physical association with a prostitute, his whole life changed. He gave up all of his spiritual practices and became what we say, a lusty person chasing after a low-class lady. So, just by wrong association, or even in the mind, of course, it's mentioned that no one is, what we say, condemned for wrong thoughts, but wrong thoughts can bring about wrong ideas and bring about wrong desires, and that ultimately lead to actions that are inauspicious or sinful. And so we see Kaikeyi, she was the favorite of Dasaratha. He would come and visit her every night. Although Kausalya was the principal queen, he had more affection and spent more time with Kaikeyi. And she took advantage, now being influenced by her maidservant, now that, well, yes, my son should actually be the king. But then, when she heard the second thing, but ban Ram to the forest for 14 years, she was shocked. Why should I do that? Ram is very powerful, Mantara said, and he will be unhappy, and he will do something to try to attack and destroy your son with his armies if once your son becomes the king. So therefore, in order to prevent that, you have a boon. Your good husband many years ago, you remember on the battlefield, he had this, Prabhupada calls it whitlock, problems in his fingers, and she nursed him back to health very nicely. He was so grateful for her care that he said, my dear wife, I want to give you a benediction. Not only one, but two. Take it. She said, I'll take it when the time comes. Very strategic. And so the time came. Now she was thinking by Mantara's influence. Now those benedictions. And she asked for two things. That her son would become the king, Bharat, and Ram would spend 14 years in the forest. Why 14 years? It's interesting. Why not 13? Why not 15? Why 14? It's called right of possession, according to the era. Right of possession means if you don't claim something that is your rightful property after 14 years, you have no claim of it. That was in Treta Yuga. The Pandavas were told to go in the forest for 13 years. That was Dwapara Yuga. So the right of possession decreases as the ages change. And in Kali Yuga, it's 12 years. Hare Krishna. Just a point of information. Sometimes we wonder, why is it 14 years? So that means Ram, after coming back, wouldn't have he wouldn't have the legality to claim the throne back. But of course, everything got switched around. Bart didn't want to rule. He was more angry at his mother for what she had done, and he tried his best to bring Ram back, and that's a beautiful story on how there was a beautiful, loving exchange. Bart came all the way into the forest with all of his soldiers to somehow persuade, and not only persuade, but beg his older brother, Lord Ram, to come back in. But Ram said, no, I cannot, because I have to follow the instructions of my father, and that is my duty. But you should rule. And therefore he gave him so many instructions on how to rule, and Bart did it from a distance. He never ruled in the kingdom, he ruled from a distance. And so, of course, it was understood that actually Lord Ram was still actually the king of Ayodhya. So that's mentioned. So this power of bad association can turn a very nice devotee into something different. So be careful. One might think it'll never happen to me. We've seen it many times, even in our Krishna conscious movement. Wrong associate. Even Krishna, we have the example of what was his name? Bhaumasura. Bhaumasura was not really an asura, but he became an asura by wrong association with Naraka. Because Bhaumasura was born from the union of Varahadev with Mother Earth. When Varahadev picked up the earth from the Garbhodak ocean and placed it on the waters, he impregnated her during that time, and a son was born called Bhoma, or Earth. And so that Bhoma was actually the son of Mother Earth and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he got into bad association, and he became a demon, and then Krishna killed him. Krishna killed his own son. So we see there's many examples in life. I'm going to read some points of, because in the Ramayana there is so many essential spiritual principles that are fundamental for devotees to understand and to adopt in our execution of devotional service. Lord Ram, he could have said to his father, you know, Father, what Kaikeyi is saying, and you agree also, is not fair, so why should we listen to her? I'll just become the king. And you'll be happy because that's what you want anyway. But he didn't. Why? Because Lord Ram was willing to go to the fires as a service to his father, who had promised being a Kshatriya. Therefore, he wasn't attached to his position. Attachment to a position really is not really a principle of devotion. Attachment to service is a principle of devotion. We can serve in so many ways, and we also like to serve in a particular way. But if somehow or other we're asked to serve in another way, then we should think, if it's coming from authority, and the authority is justified, then we can say, yeah, actually, yes, this is my duty. So many times, devotees get put into that situation where they're asked to do something that is needed, but not necessarily the service they want to do. I remember when, just to tell a little personal story, when I was in New Vrindavan, so we were short of pujaris. We had 40 deities we used to dress every day, 40, on the altars. 6 sets of Jagannath, 4 sets of Gaurnitai, 4 sets of Radha Krishna, Nrsingadev, and yeah, that was about it. And of course, Prahlad. 40 deities altogether. And of course, we had Govardhan Shila and also. And yeah, there were other deities there too. So we were always short of pujaris, obviously. And it was always during japa time that the deities would be dressed. So devotees would come to the temple, and then sometimes there was a shortage or some pujaris didn't show up. The head pujari would go walking out to the japa area and look for someone to pull in to do the puja. And you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, I'm chanting so nicely. Oh, they're going to ask me to go on the altar. I mean, some people liked it, but I didn't. To be honest, I would rather sit there and chant. So there were many times, and there was others who had the same experience, that we were asked to do a service that we weren't ready to do, nor we were doing something else, which was also service. So that happens. But Ram showed by example that if there is the need, and it's coming from the accepted authority, such as his father, in this particular case, he accepted it. So attachment to service, not attachment to position. Extreme reversals, if taken in the proper spirit, will help us fulfill our mission in life. For example, the law of gravity is only in effect in the earth sphere, not beyond. So also laws of material nature act only in material consciousness and not in spiritual consciousness. So reversals come, and therefore one should not be what we said. One should see reversals as opportunities to increase one's devotional service or to take full shelter of the Lord. Ram or Aram, when Ram went to the forest, the entire city of Ayodhya, when they heard that Ram was no longer going to be coronated as the prince and he was sent to the forest, all the citizens in Ayodhya became very, very unhappy and said, we cannot tolerate this. Kaikeyi, she's acting wrongly. Although we love Bharat, still Ram should be the king. So we're going to make the forest Ayodhya. So the entire city, millions of people, they organized and they came out into the forest, following Sumanta, who was driving the chariot with Ram. And so the citizens wanted to go to the forest to leave Ayodhya. So that was a real test. And to leave behind all of the comforts of Ayodhya and to go to the forest and develop a rule, being Ram, they were going to persuade Ram to accept their shelter in the forest and create a city there. But Ram was, of course, he avoided that, and when they all fell asleep one night, the next morning Ram was gone, and he left in such a way as they couldn't follow him. So here it says alertness in spiritual life. Lord Ram leaves the Ayodhya inhabitants when they were asleep. If one is inattentive or lazy, one will lose the taste for bhakti. Possible. These are some points. Sometimes saintly persons might cause pain to others, not to hurt them, but to benefit. Bart, when he heard what his mother had done, he was really not only unhappy, but angry. He was really angry at his mother. And she couldn't understand why. She was thinking he would be so happy to know that he would now become the king. But that wasn't his mood. He loved his brother Ram more than he loved any position that he could gain. So Bart, he says to his mother, "You're not my mother, you're my enemy." Pretty heavy. Now, so in the same way, sometimes some kind of punishment is needed to someone who is dear to you, but that punishment is like the medicine that the doctor gives the patient, just to teach a lesson. Bart could have took the throne. He could have stayed in the forest and he wanted to trade with Ram. He said, I'll stay in the forest. I'll accept our father's instructions. You go back. You rule the kingdom. Everyone wants you there. So, and he wanted to stay in the forest. So that would have been difficult for him. But he said he wanted to do it just to please everyone. So making a sacrifice for a higher principle is also one of the principles that is mentioned in this particular Leela in order to bring about success. So the goal is sometimes to please the Lord even at the expense of some difficulties. Just like sometimes we have to do a service that's so difficult. Sometimes going out on book distribution in ice cold, weather, especially when it rains. Devotees do that. They accept some difficulty, some inconvenience, just to preach Krishna consciousness, just to please the spiritual master. So this also is one of the qualities of a devotee. There's a nice story, of course. There's many particular pastimes, but one pastime is very, very instructive, and it's very, what we say, fundamental to this whole Leela, is that when they were in the forest, and it was in their last year, of course, Ravana had heard his whole army was destroyed by one person, and that was Ram. I forgot the names of those three generals who were leading that army against Ram. 14,000 soldiers. They came and attacked Ram, and Ram put Sita, this was in Panchavali, in a hiding place, and he killed the entire army except for one person who got away. And that one person got away. He told Ravana what happened. Ravana couldn't believe it. A human being has destroyed our powerful Rakshasa army, because it's understood, it's even mentioned, that the Rakshasas are a more advanced race than the human race. They are more intelligent, more powerful. Although their activities are more evil, still they are considered more advanced than humans. That's mentioned in the 5th chapter of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when it describes the hierarchy of the different races in the world. Rakshasas are on a high race. They're intelligent, they're powerful, and they don't have too many good qualities, though, obviously. And so, this Rakshasa told Ravana what happened, and Ravana was shocked. And then he described that this person, he has a very, very, very attractive and very qualified lady, and is his wife, and I think she would make a nice addition to your already long list of ladies. And so Ravana was really listening, and he getting an idea. He was describing what Sita looked like, and all her qualities. Ravana became very lusty, and he decided that he was going to go ahead. So how to do that? Because this soldier, I forgot his name. Anybody remember his name? No, that was the one came later. It was another person. His name, he's not so much known. But then Ravana was thinking how to do it. So he remembered Maricha. And Maricha had retired from demoniac life. He put in his resignation, no more demon activities. He's retired, he was getting unemployment. So he was living in the forest trying to develop some peaceful life. And Ravana thought, this is the only person who can really help. So he went and found Maricha and explained his desire that, he described this powerful person. And when Maricha heard who he's talking about, he mentioned Ram, because Maricha had already encountered Ram one time before when him and Subaha were defiling the sacrifices of the sages. What was it? Vishwamitra Muni came and got Ram to come to the forest and finish these two demons. So he shot one arrow. I was just seeing if everyone is awake or not. It hit Subaha, and it killed him immediately. And then he shot one more. You ready? He shot another arrow, and it hit Maricha and knocked him 800 miles into the ocean. And so Maricha said, "That's it. I quit." Somehow he survived. And so when he heard the person that he was supposed to, assist in tricking according to Ravana's plan, he was thinking, forget it. Not me, find somebody else. I'm not going to. In fact, he was describing that this person is so powerful that you won't be successful. But Ravana didn't want to hear. It says that lust is like an illusionary veil that covers the intelligence. Dayatam Vishayam Pumsam Sangat Sajayate Kama Kama Krodha Vijayate Krodha Bhavati Samoham Samoham Viti Vibramha Viti Brahmsa Buddhi Sasya Buddhina Sad Naprashyati. That when lusty desires appear and they cannot be fulfilled, anger comes. And when anger comes, mind becomes bewildered. And when mind becomes bewildered, one loses intelligence. And one loses intelligence, one falls down into the material consciousness. So when one becomes bewildered by this desire for lusty satisfaction, one's intelligence is, destroyed or not functioning, you might say. So in this case, Ravana couldn't hear any good advice Maricha was giving him. All he wanted to do was fulfill his desire to capture the wife of Ram. And so Ravana, when he was, told by Maricha, I'm not going to do it, he said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'll kill you. Hare Krishna. Not a very nice choice. So Maricha was thinking, well, I can be killed by Ram, or I can kill by Ravana. So I think I'd rather be killed by Ram, because at least I'll get some benefit. And so he had the power to change himself into different forms. Demons can do that. Even today there are demons who can do that. I won't get into that. It's another subject matter. But he changed himself into this deer that was glowing, and it had all kinds of beautiful, what we say, jewels. The jewels were emanating all this bright light, and it was like a mystical deer. And he came into the area where Sita, Ram, and Lakshman were, and this was in this was in Chitrakoot. And they had 13 years in the forest. There was only 1 year left. And so Sita, she sees the deer. Oh, Ram, look at that deer. He's so beautiful. I think we should bring him back to Ayodhya with us. Ram was looking. He didn't say anything. And then she was continuing using her feminine charm to try to get Ram to capture that deer, and so she would bring it back to Ayodhya. That would be her pet deer. Now Lakshman was looking. He was thinking, I know all 8,400,000 species. This is not one of them. This is some mystical creation by some Rakshasa. So he could see it. But then the deer started to run away. And then Sita became excited and said, Ram, Ram, Ram. So, but there was one interesting point that is not so much known. Before Ram went after the deer, he called Sita into their little bhajan kutir. They had a hut. And there was a little yagya, fire that was burning regularly. He took her. It says that nobody knows what he said to her, but later on the sages understood by their power. He told her that actually, I want to take you and bring you to the kingdom of the fire god, and you stay there, because it's dangerous if I leave. And you may not be here when I come back. So you should go. And he called the fire god Agni. Agni appeared, Sita agreed, and then Agni took Sita. So, and he replaced it with the Maya Sita, who was Vegavati. She was the person who wanted to marry Ram. There's a whole story about that. But Ram said, Ekapatni, only one wife in this particular incarnation. So he very nicely and politely, with all respect, refused to accept her as his wife. But he said in another incarnation. And so she was replaced as the ideal, what we say, prototype of Sita. And so Sita wasn't there when Ram chased after the deer and the deer was running. It seemed like Ram was bewildered, that he didn't know what the deer was, but this was his Leela. So at one point, Ram understood. It says that he came back to his understanding. You even have that pastime when Krishna was in Vrindavan with his wife, cowherd friends, and a demon appeared in Vrindavan, Aghasur, a big, powerful snake. He was like a huge snake, and his mouth, when he opened up, was like 1 mile high. So he laid on the path, and he wanted to attract the cowherd boys to run into his mouth, and Krishna. Krishna was a little inattentive at the time, and the cowherd boys, that's his way it's described, went into the mouth of the demon. They said, it's okay, Krishna will save us. So then Krishna looks and he sees his friends going into this mouth of this big, hideous demon, and Krishna becomes bewildered. Hare Krishna. It says, this is how the Acharyas describe it, Krishna became bewildered. But then the next minute he was no longer bewildered. So this momentary bewilderment was indicated how the power of the illusionary energy is so strong that even me, the Supreme Lord, can be bewildered. So it was an example to teach how powerful Maya can be. And so, so then Ram realized who this deer was, and he fired his arrow, and he hit Maricha, and Maricha had the power to speak exactly like Rama, and he calls, Lakshman, Lakshman, come. Now Lakshman was told by Rama, you don't leave Sita. It's dangerous. There's so many Rakshasas here. But what happened was, during that time when Ram was chasing after the deer, Lakshman was there, and Sita said, now your brother's in trouble, go help him. He's calling for your help. Lakshman said, he can take care of himself. He doesn't need me. No, he's actually calling. But I can't leave you. It's dangerous. Oh. Then she said, she started to speak like an ordinary lady. And she said, now I understand everything. All this time, you just wanted to be with me. Oh, when Lakshman heard that, he was he was angry. At first he was offended, and it was an insult. But then he became upset, because he had never even looked at her face to face. He would always see her in a respectful manner by looking at her lotus feet. That's how he would approach her. Now she's criticized him, saying that he has another intention. And then he became so upset, and she was so persistent that he said, all right. And he took his bow, and he drew what was called the chakra, the circle of protection. He said, you stay in this circle. It'll protect you. And he left. When Ram saw Lakshman in the forest, he said, what are you doing here? Why are you leaving Sita? Let's go. It's dangerous. So they both came back. And of course, during that time, Ravana had come and had persuaded Sita to come out of the circle. He acted like a mendicant who hadn't eaten for so many days, and now he was hungry and he couldn't even move. My dear lady, I'm so hungry. Oh, she said, oh, you look like a nice sadhu. Oh, I want to help you. Oh, please give me some food. But I can't come out of this circle. Oh, but please, you have to. So she was apparently bewildered by Ravana, and of course, ultimately, he captured, but he didn't capture the real Sita. He captured the Maya Sita, because it's explained that the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his internal energy cannot be touched in any way by any force in this world. And that also applies to devotees too. This is very important. As devotees, if we are situated nicely in our Krishna consciousness and regularly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, nothing material can touch you. Nothing. That's the power of Krishna consciousness, and that's the power of the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And there's many, many examples where devotees were in the most dangerous situations, but because they were chanting Hare Krishna, they were saved from that situation. So that's the power of this Krishna conscious movement. So that's there also, that even the devotees can also receive the same mercy as the internal energy if they're nicely situated and chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And so, and of course, the story goes on how Ram, acting like an ordinary husband who has lost his wife, is now lamenting the loss of his dear consort. And then that leads to ultimately to the Battle of Lanka. That was an amazing description of how that a husband has to do everything. This is the duty of a husband to protect the wife in the most dangerous situation. I remember one time I was giving a class in Croatia. It was a seminar program, and I was talking about the duty of a husband is to always make sure the wife has protection. She depends on him, And he is dutiful to give protection in all situations. So a husband is supposed to give the wife three things: protection, affection, and nice clothes, jewelry, and food. Hare Krishna. Remember that. And the wife is supposed to give unalloyed and loving service to the husband in any situation. And that makes the ideal marriage. Of course, people say, well, that's Sita and Ram. My husband's not Ram. And the husband will say, my wife's not Sita. So we have to work out what they call the default program. But that's actually the standard. And so one time I was giving this lecture and I was talking about that, and the husband was sitting on one side and the wife was sitting on another side. So this was during the summertime, and a gigantic wasp came inside of the room and went right on the lady. And I turned to the husband, save her! Because, we're supposed to, help religious principles be carried out. That's our but he didn't. Somebody else did. But she got saved anyway. So, you find situations like that. So that this is and we see this is an example on the extreme level, when such a great personality as Sita Devi gets captured by a Rakshasa, apparently. So how much time do we have for the class? I don't really. Till 9:30? One more hour? Huh? Oh, that clock's wrong? It's 5 to 9? Okay. Okay, I could read some more points. I mean, the Ramayana is just so full of spiritual instructions. When Ram was fighting with Ravana, that was the final battle, and Ram was shooting his arrows, and it was cutting off the heads of Ravana, and every time his head would fall, another head would grow in its place. So Ram was getting a little bewildered. He kept shooting arrows in his head. And so, but Vibhishan reminded him, because Ram when they were staying at Chitrakoot, they had met this great sage called Agastya Muni. And Agastya Muni gave a gift to Ram. He said, this arrow will be the cause of your victory. And he gave it to him. And he said, use it when it's required. So sages, they also know past, present, and future. So Ram kept that arrow special. And so, the message here is that Ram got instructions from Agastya Muni, so you might say, in one sense, Agastya was acting as the spiritual master. So when Ram was apparently unable to kill Ravana, although he was apparently shooting off his heads, Vibhishan reminded Ram that, hey, his power is in his heart. Don't shoot for the head, shoot for the heart. So he had that arrow, and he reminded him, and he took out that arrow. So this was the instructions of the Guru, that during the time of execution of devotional service, when one remembers the instructions of the spiritual master in any situation of devotional service, one can successfully carry out the instructions of the spiritual master. So at one point, Ram took up that arrow and he pulled it back. When he pulled that arrow back, the entire globe, the entire earth started to shake. That arrow was so powerful. and he pulled it back on his bow. Monkeys were falling, Rakshasas were falling, everything was shaking. And then when he released that arrow sped like the speed of the mind into the heart of Ravana, went through his heart, came out the other side, went into the earth, killed a bunch of demons who were in the earth, came back out of the earth, came back around, and came back into his quiver. And that was the end of Ravana. Jai Shri Ram. And that's the beauty about spiritual life, that God always wins. So if we stay connected to Krishna in devotional service, to Ram, to any of them, principal incarnations, you can't lose. You may lose materially, but that's no loss. Losing materially sometimes is the springboard for winning spiritually. Sometimes. But even on the material level, at times devotees become successful in their execution of devotional service. So becoming successful in devotional service means to make devotional service the main priority in life. Of course, so I'm speaking to all of you who are all devotees, many of you, but we get interfered many times with material responsibilities, and we have a choice sometimes to accept material responsibilities or to take care of some responsibilities or some services in spiritual life. It comes up all the time. Why? Because Krishna tests you just to see where your allegiance is or how devoted you are. That is a test that devotees get quite often. I have my material responsibilities, I have my devotional service. But what becomes the most important thing at the time? And that takes prayer, that takes some understanding, and many times it takes some good advice to make the proper choice. Because it says, if you give up the spiritual for the material, you lose both. Material is not permanent, spiritual is. One who accepts the spiritual and pushes aside the material, even if it's difficult, will always be successful. Because one who pleases Krishna, everything becomes wonderful. And by accepting service to the Lord, when the service is difficult, Bhaktivedanta Thakur explains in a very nice way. He writes in his Saranagri, one of his
भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति
austerity. You ready for the Abhishek? Okay. Okay, I'll tell one quick little story. Ravana was going through his kingdom and he decided to visit his brother Vibhishan. And he went into Vibhishan's quarters, and on the wall, he saw on the wall
Ramo Ramo Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo 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 Hare Hare